All right, now we're live. All right, hello everybody, good morning. So yesterday you guys started your own API, got a good amount of it done, but today we're going to start the projects that we will be working on for the rest of the time here. So let's introduce the projects. So the one that I will be working on in class is a Crimson Coupon app. And what it does is it allows businesses to offer deals that gets delivered to students. And so students will be able to subscribe via the online form, and then they'll receive coupons as text. And then businesses would be able to log into the website as an admin and be able to post the coupons. And then there will be super admins who then approve the coupons, and they can choose when to send out the coupons and like add other admins and do stuff like that. And then the projects that you guys will be working on in pairs during the hack times will be a dorm supplies delivery app. So it'll be a web storefront that allows students to purchase dorm supplies, and then they will get delivered to their dorm. So students have access to the online store, and admins will receive notifications when anything is bought, and they'll be able to mark things as paid or delivered depending on if the person paid, and then they'll go and deliver it themselves. So you won't be adding like Square or any payment stuff. They'll just do it externally via Venmo or something like that. And then admins can create new items and create new admins. Any questions about either project? Do they both make sense? Yeah? All right, so now we're going to go about planning it. So how the heck do we plan an API? So first, always plan everything before you start coding. Otherwise, you'll get halfway through and realize, oh wait, this doesn't work. And then you'll have to go back, fix a bunch of things, and it might end up taking a lot longer. So always make the big design decisions before starting. And so what are some of the important decisions? What are our basic objects? So going back to the Crimson Coupon app that we'll be working on during lectures, what are the objects that we'll be using? So think back to yesterday about the REST stuff. And so what are like the big canonical endpoints that we'll have? Can anybody name one? You saw the code yesterday, so. Anyone? Still asleep? There's one in the name. Yeah, a coupon, right? So we'll have a coupon. And what else? Who gets the coupons? A user, right? Anything else? An admin. And a super admin. So I'm calling the businesses admins and the people who administrate the admins super admins. And those are pretty much all of the building blocks of our API, right? And so which one may be similar to other ones? All three of these have a lot of overlapping information, right? So I would argue that we could actually store them all in one database and call it like the user database, and then just have a flag like, oh, they're an admin. Oh, they're also a super admin. And so since a lot of the information overlaps, it might not make sense to have them in separate databases. It might, but that's one of the design decisions that we'll make before we start coding. So who thinks that we should have them in separate databases? Anyone? Who thinks they should be in the same? Most people. All right, give me an argument as to why. Yeah.
Because people can be admins and users, so
exactly.
it would be redundant if you have three.
Exactly. So that would be the biggest reason I would argue. So what if a user is an admin as well? You'd be replicating a lot of your information and unnecessarily. So why not just keep all of them in the same and then just say, oh, they're an admin, oh, they're a super admin. So we can collapse all of these into just a user. Cool. Now, how do we organize these endpoints using our REST design patterns? So what big endpoints will we have? Slash what? Coupons. and slash users. And so what data do you think we should store with each object? So let's create some more space here. All right, so let's start brainstorming some what we would store with either object. So yeah, a unique ID with both of them. What else? What might be important to remember about either one of these? Should be really easy at first. Yeah. Name. Just start yelling them out. Yeah. Phone number. Email.
They might store like their
Venmo username. Anything else? Maybe their address if we're going to deliver to them. What else? How do we keep track of if they're an admin or not? Is admin and is super admin. And if they're an admin, they'll need to log in, right? So we'll need to save a password or a hash. What else? Probably their phone provider in case you want to send them texts. I jotted some ideas. Maybe a creation date. So one big thing we're missing out that could possibly be a whole other object is what happens when a transaction goes through. Where do we store that? So that's where that's a huge design decision that you need to make. Do we now have a third object that's like purchases, or do we store it with one of these either coupons or users? And so that is a design decision that we'll save for a little bit. So purchases. That's something we'll have to figure out once we make a bigger decision down the line. And so I said, we'll also, if they're an admin, super admin, we'll store their company name. And then if we think of anything else, we'll add it to that. What about coupons? What do we want to store with each coupon? Yeah, posted date. Yeah.
The company or the admin that posted.
Yeah, who posted by. Company name. Used by date. Like expiration. Begin date. And what date it was actually accepted, approval date. What else? The coupon itself, the name. Did I steal yours?
Like the discount amount of the coupon's worth.
Yeah, worth. So I would just shove that into name, but yeah, exactly. Maybe a URL if there's going to be an image. URL is nice because it could be an image, it could be like their website, anything that identifies it. What else? Anything come to mind? I think that's good for now. And so what functionality are we going to be looking for? So what are some things that we'll need to have our API be able to do? Anything? Create a user. Yeah, the most basic one. Create user. What else? Yeah. edit user, update. Delete user. Get users, right? Same thing with coupons, right? What else? So those are all the basic operations. So now what additional functionality are we looking for? We have to have a way to make a user an admin, right? So maybe make admin. And so all these with admins, right? Create admin, update an admin, delete an admin, get who are admins. And same thing with coupons, right? We don't want to just be able to get all the coupons. Maybe we want only the active coupons. And so same thing with active coupons. And one more, or two more. What are like the big things that we would want in something like this? Being able to send the coupons, right? Sending them. Anything else? Maybe something with purchases later on, but that will again be something that we decide later. And then what are some potential difficulties that we could see? Anything? What are you most worried about? Like if I said, all right, start now, everyone would be like, wait, I have no idea what to do, right? So what would come to your mind first? Yeah.
How to set up password hash, I guess?
Yeah, so how are we going to hash our password? So this is a big one. Yeah.
How are we going to store the database?
Yeah, what database are we going to use, which we'll talk about later on today. What else? There must be something else. If not, you can just start working and I can head out. Yeah.
Like how to make the information like permanent, not like temporary.
Yeah, exactly. So how do we keep the information around, which we'll talk about later today as well. Yeah.
You have to like keep the coupons active, so like actively changing it. So let's say if a coupon like becomes deactive, then you have to remove it from the database.
Yeah, right. The active coupons. This is not going to be trivial. That'll be a big, like, how the heck are we going to do that moment? What else? What about login? Login might be difficult. We'll have to check if they're an admin. We'll have to check if they're super admin. And depending on which they are, we'll have to show them different information. And that might be another struggle. Yeah.
I have a question actually.
Yeah.
For creation date, are we going to change that when they update their like profile, or would you want to create a separate field?
We'll want to create a separate field. Good call. So there's creation date and update date. And then we would have that as well over here. Yeah.
We want to keep track of a user's history of purchases.
Yeah, so any history like purchases. So we'll talk about everything like purchases later. I'm sure there'll be other difficulties we'll run into. And so then we start brainstorming algorithms. So how may we start to hash the password? So any guesses?
Can we find something online?
Yeah, find something online. Think back to PSET 2 CS50. Right, you could write your own hash algorithm. Though it's probably better to use something online because they'll be more secure. What about like getting active coupons? That might be a hard one. Let's brainstorm an algorithm that we can like parse through all the information we have and say, all right, this is now an active coupon. So what constraints would that need? Yeah.
Well, the expiration date can't have passed.
Yeah, it'll have to be before the expiration date, so we need to look at that. after the begin date. So posted date or begin date? Begin date, yeah. Is that it? Anything that's begun that hasn't expired? Posted by the right person, yeah. What do you mean by that? So which information would we look for? Close. You're on the right track. Yeah.
The URL works. Like it's like some weird URL. Like if you click on it, nothing happens.
Yeah, that too. I would argue that we should do that during the creation phase, but yeah, we should definitely do that at some point. Yeah.
There's like an approval date.
Yeah, it needs to be approved first, right? And so those are probably the three things that we'll be looking for. And so before the expiration date, after the begin date, but also after the approved date. Or you can just check if the approved date exists. Good. Any other things that we want to brainstorm about? Like how would we make somebody an admin? So who can add admins? Super admins. Who can add super admins? Other super admins. So we're starting to see a little problem. Anybody see what the problem is?
We need like a root super admin.
Yeah, we need our first super admin. So what happens when we're like, all right, we're done coding. Let's push our code. Let's log in. Wait, I got to ask the super admin to make me super admin. So creating that first super admin is going to be a problem. So how might we go about doing that? Yeah.
Could you just put the like first person to create a username like becomes a super admin automatically?
Yeah, that would be one way to solve it. So whoever logs in first instantly becomes a super admin. What could be a problem with that solution?
Wrong person.
Yeah, what if you're like, all right, I am at 2 a.m. gonna log in, nobody's awake. I'm gonna log in first, I'll be the super admin. But somebody in, I don't know, studying for their finals is like, man, I could really use a cookie right now. Let me log in. All of a sudden, oh, I have access to everything. That might be a problem, right?
Like manually give someone access?
Yeah, manually do it. So that would be a very robust solution. Just, all right, once I start, I'll just hit the database manually and say, all right, I'm going to insert myself here. Because only you, presumably, would have access to the server, and therefore only you would be able to create this first super admin. Any other possibilities? Yeah.
Put a default password and username for that first person.
Yeah. And then when would we insert them?
Before you make the system go live.
Exactly. So have what's called like a init script, initialization script that will run and say, as soon as the server is about to start, check the database. If there are no super admins, go ahead and create the first one. Any other possible solutions? Which one do you think would be most maintainable out of the three solutions proposed?
Last one sounds good.
Yeah, last one sounds great, right? We don't have to do anything. We just say restart the database and it'll do everything automatically. Cool. Any other algorithms we would want to start thinking about before hopping in and starting coding? If you want to look up the slides online, we're working on a couple projects during class. No? All right. So what are other things that we'll want to consider? So keep things maintainable, easy to change. That way, moving forward, it's easy to just pick up and start adding features. And keep future plans in mind. What do I mean by that? Separate all of your changeable values. So you remember in like CS50, when you're doing Mario, we had maybe a maximum height. Did we hard code that, or what did we do with that? Yeah, we made it like a global variable, right? Maybe that was a bad example. Maybe more like the game of 15. What if we wanted to have a 3x3 or a 4x4 or whatever? Would we want to, if we're going to change it from a 3x3 to 4x4, we would have to go through our code and change every single time we said, all right, is it less than 3? Is it less than 3? Is it less than 3? Which might be like hundreds of times. And so instead, what would we do? We'd create a global variable and use that global variable everywhere. That way, if we wanted to change it later on, we just change that variable and then we're done. We don't have to look through our code and maybe we'll miss one down the line that would cause everything to break. And so separating our changeable values allows us to then make decisions later on that will affect the entire program without having to go through and change everything. And then put architecture in place for future functionality. So what might be other functionality we're looking for with this app? Maybe like analytics. That would be helpful for the business, right? So maybe when we're setting up this, we might jot down some things that will help us get analytics in place later. So what might those things be? Yeah.
How much time the user has spent.
Yeah, how much time have they spent? So time. What else? Yeah.
Like what kind of company posts the coupons, you can like categorize them.
Yeah, we could start to look through and categorize them. So tags. What else?
How many coupons were used?
Yeah, so redeemed. Anything else? If we have tags here, what would we most likely want to do? Have tags with the users as well, right? That way we can start saying, oh, look, there was a thing posted for Mexican food. These people like Mexican food. And so we can start to do stuff like that. What else? Anything else? Yeah.
Like the coupons viewed and then the ones clicked.
Exactly, viewed and clicked. So we can say, oh, look, we can go to a business and say, hey, look, we delivered our coupon to 50,000 people. Look at that. Anything else we might want to add? I think that's pretty good. And so maybe we won't even use these things at the beginning. But once the architecture is in place, we won't have to go make radical changes later. And it's not like it's taking up a ton of room if we don't add anything to it. Cool. So let's go ahead and start working on this. So now we're at a stage. We've whiteboarded, literally. We kind of have an idea where we want to go. What's our next step? If I said, all right, go, what would you do?
Make a plan of what to work on.
Yeah, so what might be the first thing we'd want to tackle? Yeah.
Like create a user.
Yeah, creating a user, definitely. Because we can't really create a coupon without saying, oh, it's posted by this person, which means we need a user first. And we can't create an admin without having a user. So user's like the most important step. So we should definitely tackle that first. So let's start making a to-do list, maybe. Create user. What else? Yeah.
It's just like all the basic functionality for users.
Yeah, so pretty much CRUD user. So create, read, update, delete users. What else? So out of these, what order should we tackle these in? Yeah.
Reading them and then creating, updating, and then deleting.
Yeah, I would say definitely reading first, because then that allows you to ensure that you actually created a user once you created one. Then maybe creating. Then update and delete, it doesn't really matter. I generally do delete first and then update, just because update's hardest and I'm a procrastinator, but it's personal preference there. Then what? What are two possible things? Yeah, either admins or what other direction could we go? Yeah, login password. So we could either build out our functionality for users and then do coupons next. We could do the basic stuff for users, basic stuff for coupons, more stuff for users, more stuff for coupons, and start alternating like that. I'll let you guys decide which one would you rather do.
Let's like build the basic stuff for both.
Basic stuff for both? Yeah, it doesn't matter. That's more like your design choice. You're the one working on it, so you get to choose. So we could do some basic stuff for users, basic stuff for coupons, and then kind of just alternating between the two until we build out everything. Cool, now what would we do? Now that we have a little to-do list, I'm sure we'll be adding to that as we find other things we forgot to plan. Are you ready to start coding? Yes, no? Is there anything else we should plan first? Because if not, then we are ready to start coding. I would say we have a pretty good roadmap. So let's hop into it, I guess. All right. So now that we're going to start coding, what should we start coding first?
I think we would start importing things in the top of our file.
Yeah, I would say, so are you saying create the list of things that we're going to use, or create our like basic server file and then start adding things, libraries as we find?
Probably the latter.
The latter? So let's start just coding our basic server and then find out what we need in order to have something very basic together. So type, and then all of a sudden code appears. So this is almost the same as the boilerplate code that I gave you yesterday. So we can kind of go through this really quickly. I'll push the code right now so that you guys can grab it. All right, so this is under the class files. And let me know if you have any problems retrieving them. Do you guys always get git conflicts whenever you pull from this? No? Is everybody comfortable resolving git conflicts? Does anybody want to cover that in more detail? Yes? All right, let's do that now. So how would I create a git conflict? All right, so what I did is I branched and then created a test directory with a test file in it. So imagine in blue, let me see. Imagine in the blue over here we have like the Git repo that's up in the cloud. So what we're all looking at in GitHub. And then you guys are kind of doing this. So once you first clone, you have pretty much the same thing, right? And let's just draw that as the one single line. So at the beginning, we're all like this, right? Everybody has the exact same thing, but then you clone, and then you start adding notes during class. And so maybe now you're over here. And I draw a dotted line because you didn't commit anything, you just started working, but diverged from what I was doing. But maybe I was over here working on this stuff and said, all right, that's the code from the lecture. And then what happens when you try to pull? It says, uh-oh, these two things are no longer the same. And so Git doesn't really know exactly what you want to do. And so it can make a best guess, which is called an auto merge. And so it'll try to say, I assume if they're both working on different files and you try to pull it together, you want to combine everything, which is a fair assumption. I can't think of a case where you wouldn't want that to happen, or a case where it would do that and and you're not able to get what you want eventually. And so that's called an auto merge. A fast forward is if you didn't actually work on anything, so you have nothing over here, and the last time you worked was the last time I worked as well, but I just did some stuff without you. When you pull that, it says, all right, you just want to go from here to here. So that's called a fast forward. You just move forward in time. But if you had diverged, when you pull, it says, hey, I don't know what you're trying to do here. We're different. So I want you to commit to what you have before doing anything else. Because if you don't commit, you don't have anywhere to fall back to in case something goes wrong. Does that make sense why Git does that? So when you try to pull and there are things up here that aren't down here, it says, before you pull, just make a commit, please, so that if I screw up, you can at least go back to where you were. And so that's why it wants you to commit. So then you can go ahead and say, all right, I'm committing, this is now a change. And then when you try to pull, it can go ahead and auto merge, and if it does something you don't want to, you can just fall back to this. And if it does the auto merge, then now it's kind of like that. And so now it's a merge, and maybe I keep working forward like this, and you also want to keep moving forward like this. You just kind of whoop, whoop, keep moving along. But actually, it more looks like, yeah, that. But if not, then maybe you diverge again, and then start merging all over. Yeah?
Is that new commit like a new file? Or is it kind of like a...
It's like a new checkpoint.
Oh, okay. And how do we go back to those checkpoints?
So first you do a git log. You do a git log, and you can see all of the commits that I've made. So if we scroll all the way down, we have like the first commit, and then I started adding stuff to day 0, add the source code for day 1, add the exercise, and you can see that how we kind of move forward in time. And then say I'm like, oh shoot, I didn't want to actually start the Coupon API project. I want to go back to the point in time where I hadn't started that project, but had added the Lecture 5 slides. So anybody know how we'd do that? Yeah. Yeah, so if I did git reset -- hard, I would reset myself to that commit and would kind of lose that later commit. I can do it, so git check out hard. Oops. All right, head is now at Lecture 5 slides, which means, say this was Lecture 5 slides, and this is the latest commit I just made with the new Coupon API. I just went like this. We're now here. And if I do a git log, add Lecture 5 slides, can I scroll up? No. So for all we know, everything else was now lost. And so that's why git reset hard is something you might not want to use unless you know what you're doing. Because like if I waited a month and came back, that stuff would be gone. But thankfully the commit still exists out there, and if I know how to reference it by scrolling up and saying, oh look, this commit still exists somewhere, I can now get that. So it still exists, and it hasn't been garbage collected yet. But if I wait until Git says, all right, there's nothing actually referencing this commit, because it's kind of just out there now, and there's no timeline between here and here, because we just reset where we were to here, this will just eventually disappear. But it'll stick around for about 30 days or so. Yeah.
Is there a way to look at a file that was in one of the previous commits,
Mhm.
and kind of like take a certain component of it and kind of
Yeah,
okay.
exactly.
How do we open the file from like one of those? Maybe take one of those code things and then.
Yeah, I'll show you in 1 second. So say we had been working on the Coupon API project a little bit, but hadn't officially said, all right, I'm going to create a new commit here. And I did a git reset hard back to here. What happened with this? There's no way to say restore that state because we didn't actually commit anything. So that stuff is gone forever. And so that's why git reset hard is maybe not something you want to do unless you have already committed. Another way to go look at this stuff without actually saying, with an easy way to get back to here would be to check it out. So git reset says, I want to restore the state as if we were here. But git checkout just says, I'm going to go look at the files to remember what I was doing back then. And so that's the difference between a reset and a checkout. So I could do git checkout here. And this is when I just added everyone to that array for the randomization. And if I look, we can go into day 1. That was in the morning. And you can see that we had added everybody to the students. But say we wanted to go look at the commit before that, what do we expect the students to say? So right now, we're at this commit where we add students to array, but say I wanted to go back to the commit before that. So git checkout so that's a shortcut of saying that commit before where we are. If we then look at students, it's empty because I hadn't yet added students to that array. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Checkout is better thought of as checking out something.
Mhm.
So looking at something.
Exactly.
Checkout as a store.
Yeah, it's not checkout like I'm making a purchase. It's like I'm just checking that person out. So what happens if we don't actually want to go check out a full commit and we only wanted to grab an older file? So that's also using the checkout command, but in a slightly different syntax. So git checkout master says go back to this master branch because we have the ability to create branches, right? And the default one is called the master. And then we can create alternate realities by creating other branches, and we can name them whatever we want. So what if we're here? So we're at the head of master, and we said, oh, I want to go grab that students array from back there when it used to be empty, but I don't want to go check out the entire commit. We could do that. So we could say, this commit here is the commit before we started adding students to the array. And as of right now, the students array is filled up. But I could say git checkout that hash, but only the students array. And then if we look at the students array, it's empty. But if we look at our git log, we're still at the most recent checkout or commit. Does that make sense? But oops, I didn't actually want to overwrite students like that. So if I do a git status, it says, hey, modified, we modified the students array in our current directory. What if I said, oops, I didn't want to modify that? How do I get it back to where it was before? There are like 5 different ways you can do it. One way would just be git checkout what? master. So that says get back to the where we were. So we could do git checkout master. That would work. What's one other way using git checkout? It even has the first same 3 words. So git checkout master says we want to check out the full commit at the end of master branch. Yeah, git checkout master students.js says we want to check out that current commit at the end of the master branch, but only the students file. And so both of those would do the same thing. And if you look at the status, it no longer says we have modified it. And we can just make sure, nope, everybody's there. What's another way we could have done it? Using only the commands that we've talked about today. We could git reset hard back to the beginning, and that would work as well. So now what happens? So now, say we're here, I've done some changes up in lecture, you've made some changes in notes, and you say, and I commit, I said, all right guys, you can now pull my code, I'm gonna make this commit. And you're like, okay, let me pull it. What's gonna happen? Conflict, yes, but something's gonna happen before the conflict. Remember the steps that we went through back here? Yeah, it's going to say, hey, you have unstored changes. I don't know what to do, because some things will change if you pulled the code as it is now, and you won't be able to revert back to it. So go ahead and make a commit before you try to pull. Does that make sense why Git says that? Because maybe you had something, maybe you wrote a comment that was like mind-blowing. You solved cancer, but then if you pulled from here, it would overwrite that, and that wasn't, you didn't commit that anywhere. It's just gone forever, and so there goes your billions of dollars. Right? So Git says, I don't know if you wrote something mind-blowing in here, so go ahead and commit it so that you can revert back to it later. So you're going to have to commit first, and then what? Then you can pull, and you're going to create this merge. And maybe there are merge conflicts, maybe not. And if there are merge conflicts, you don't actually get a solid circle there, right? It's like this, if we continue our like dotted or solid circle analogy, it's like, all right, we're almost done creating that merge, but there's a little conflict here. I'll let you work on that first before you commit. And so I helped a few of you yesterday where you're kind of stuck in this limbo where you had git pulled, you had resolved the changes, but you can't really move forward until you make that a commit. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Would there be a scenario where you commit and like you wouldn't be able to merge? As in like, sorry, let me phrase that correctly. Is there a scenario where like we couldn't pull if even after committing?
I don't think so. At least if you have correct read permissions to this repository, I don't think that there's a case where that would happen. You might get a ton of merge conflicts, but it'll say, all right, I'll try to merge. Was that a question? Yeah.
Yeah. What if we wanted to just pull and just completely take what you wrote, but not care about our code, like not care about the conflicts, just like.
Oh, so you can. So how do you do this essentially? And then.
Not like delete, but I guess would it just be a checkout or?
Yeah. So you could.
Did you say something about sweeping under the rug? Or
So yeah, git stash will say any changes that you've made, sweep them under the rug for now. But that's only the files that Git knows about. So if you created a new file, and I also created a new file, if you tried to stash, it would say, for all I know, this file doesn't be your to-do list that you never want to push. And so in that case, stash wouldn't be the solution. You would actually have to commit and then merge. Yeah. Let me finish answering that question. So the way to force that yours is like this is you would do, I don't know if I want to introduce remote branches, but if you do a command that's git branch -r, that shows you the branches in the remote repository. And so there's this origin/master, origin being this whole repository, because if you did git remote v, it says, hey, origin is what you're pulling from at this URL. And so if you did a git reset hard origin master, that would force this upon your local repository. Yeah.
Can we just like git reset hard and then git pull, or would that mess something up?
You could do a git pull force, which forces the pull,
Oh, okay.
and then do a git reset hard to origin master. The better way to do that would be a git fetch, which is update your remote history, and then to do a git reset hard to origin master. But if you don't know what git fetch is, you could just do a git pull force. Yeah.
What if like you want like for example in this case if we have like day 1, day 2, day 3,
Mhm.
and you want to keep like your day 1 and day 2, and then just add like the day 3 file that's like on your GitHub, then would you do like git add, like you wouldn't do, because git pull would like merge all the changes
Yeah.
for like everything.
So presumably I won't be adding to the older days, and I won't be adding to older days. So when you pull, there won't be any changes to the earlier days. So that wouldn't really be a case that we'll run into. If I had, I don't know if there's an easy way to do it, but you could git checkout origin master, which, so git fetch will refresh this. You could do a git checkout origin master, and then copy those files back, I guess, would be the best way. Google might have a better way, but the way I would do it if I didn't have internet would be to refresh the remote branch, grab the files that I want, check out my own branch, add those, and then go on with my life. But Google probably has a better solution than that. I just don't know one off the top of my head. Any other questions about Git? Were you guys all able to pull what I just pushed without any issues? If you ran into an issue, do you now know why that's an issue and how to fix it? For the most part. Git's very dense software, and I remember being just terrified of it at the beginning. But the more you practice, the more you learn stuff. Just like coding. All right. So are we comfortable with Git? Comfortable to start writing code in our server? Yeah? Any no's? Because if there are any no's, we can go over anything at any time. So if you have any questions about anything we've covered before, just let me know and we can recover it in more detail. But I don't hear any objections, so let's start working on this stuff. So does everybody have this coupon API? Ooh. Okay, does anybody know what just happened to me? So I was doing whatever commands you saw me do, and then I CD'd into my coupon API folder, and all I saw was node modules. Does anybody know what happened to me? And then I was like, what's going on? So I did a git status, and it said, or I did a git checkout master, and it said, your branch is behind origin master by 1 commit and can be fast forwarded. Can anybody translate that into understandable words? What happened to me just now?
Did you reset yourself back to 1?
Yeah, exactly. So when I was demonstrating git reset hard, I had made this commit and pushed it. And then I was like, yeah, check out, guys. I know what I'm doing. I can git check out hard to here. But then I can get back to here. But I got back to here, and I never got back to here. So I was like, wait, what happened to all my code? Uh-oh, do I have to rewrite it? But it says, your branch is behind origin master by 1 commit and can be fast forwarded. So what does that mean? Yeah, it means I was here, but the remote is here. So we have the same history. They're just 1 commit ahead of me. And so if I pulled, what kind of pull would it be? Fast forward, which means what? Yeah, it means that we just kind of move forward in time, and now I'm back to where I was. Does that make sense? Cool. So now we are ready to start coding in our coupon API. We have const express is require express, path is path, Morgan Morgan, or logger is Morgan, body parser is body parser. What does that mean? What did I do? What does requiring do? Imports a library. And so what are those things? Yeah, it's middleware. It's external NPM libraries that we're now including. Then we have config gets require /model/config. What's the difference between line 6 and what we saw on lines 1 through 4? Yeah, so /models means it's within my directory, which means it's a JavaScript file that I wrote rather than something I required or something I npm installed from the npm repositories. Everybody clear on that distinction?
Can you remind us why you declare the const keyword?
Yeah, so const is something that was introduced in ES6, which is the newest ECMAScript standard, and it just means create this variable, store whatever I'm declaring it as into this variable, but if I now try to change that variable, don't let me in error. So it's just my way of being extra safe that I don't accidentally mess up any of the stuff up there. Yeah.
Sorry, for the syntax for the middleware,
Mhm.
is putting it in that form allow for that when we plug in npm into the command line, it downloads automatically, or these are like kind of external things we have to
Yeah.
download.
So the question for the mic is, we did const express gets require express. Did that install that for us? And does that allow us to auto install? Not quite, because how do we auto install? What file do we use? Package.json. So we haven't started writing our own package.json yet, but presumably we're going to have to add express, path, Morgan, and body parser into our package.json so that anybody else who starts to code this will be able to install all of it with npm install. So now that we talked about it, let's actually do that. So I already wrote package.json, but can anybody explain all of this to me? One brave soul, maybe multiple brave souls.
The package.json?
Mhm.
So all of it or just the dependencies?
As much as you want.
Yeah, okay. I mean, like, it's like the name, version, author. I think that's like pretty straightforward.
Uh-huh.
I'm not 100% sure what private does.
Okay.
Then scripts, those are the JavaScripts to be referenced. And then dependencies are the various node packages you have to install as well as their version numbers.
Exactly. So repeating for the microphone, name, version, and author is all just metadata associated with this repository. Private true, what that means is we don't want to push this to be a separate npm package. So we don't want people to be able to do npm install HSA coupon API and then require that into their code. So private true just means, hey, I'm not going to be pushing this to the npm like cloud, I guess. So Express is a package that isn't private because it's up on the cloud and people can require it into their own code. We're not writing a module, we want it to just be private. So you and I can play with it, but it's not going to get published to the npm. And then scripts are scripts that we can run at the command line using shortcuts. And then dependencies is every package that we use in our code that is associated with a specific version or semi-specific version. Good. So if we run npm install now, so I'll do it in a separate terminal window. npm install, what will it do? Yeah, it'll run through the dependencies in package.json and try to install those, which I'd already done. So diving a little deeper into what the scripts are, if I do npm run, it will read package.json and tell me what scripts are available. So it says available via npm run script, build, which does npm install, and start, which runs node r server file. So if I did npm run build, then it will run this npm install command for me. So if it's such an easy command, why would I want to write that as a separate script. It actually takes longer to write npm run build than it takes to write npm install. So why might I have done that? Yeah, so I can add to it later. So if all of us are all working together and working on this project, and we're like, okay, building it, all we have to do is install everything, so just run npm install. And then later on, somebody's like, oh, by the way, guys, I added this init script that you have to run as well. So don't forget to run that after you run npm install. And then somebody else is like, oh, I also did this, so don't forget to do this as well after you run npm install and also the init script. And so we can start adding that into the script so it does it automatically. And so everybody just has to remember, in order to build it, run npm run build. And same thing with start. Yeah.
So npm run build like can run multiple like what do the files be like if from like init would not be in this document?
So it's actually just a bash. These are bash commands that you can just run in a command line. So if we did npm install and echo hi, I installed for you, then it will run that echo hi installed for you after npm install. So if we save that and then run it, it does npm install. If that works, do we all know what the and does? What does it do in JavaScript? What's and? It's a Boolean operator. So it says if this first thing is true, the other thing also has to be true in order for it to run, which is something that we use when scripting that says if this first command that we do works, then also do this command. But if this command returns false, if it fails, then you don't have to worry about the rest of the expression because it's going to be false anyway. And so that's an easy way to chain commands in scripting. So when we did npm install and echo this, npm install worked, so then it also does the right side of that Boolean expression, which does echo hi installed for you, and it works. Does that make sense? So scripts are something that's unnecessary. You don't have to add scripts to your package.json, but I just find it really convenient because if you do front end and back end both, you might build them in slightly different ways, and it's a lot easier just to remember run that build command than to run the specific one for either. Yeah?
One of your dependencies is debug, but you require path.
So path is actually built into Express, I believe. And there's also debugger built in that I don't ever use, but people say install it anyway, so I did. And what path allows us to do is I didn't actually use it yet, but when you're constructing paths, if you're on Linux or anything that's Unix, it's like /this, /this, /this. But on Windows, it might be C:\, \this. And so path, when we declare paths, it allows us to have it work on both Windows and PCs.
But it's not a dependency that you have to.
I believe it's built into Express. But good question. Anything that we don't understand up to this point? Cool. So we just wrote our package.json, and now we're able to install everything. So we already ran npm install, and we should be able to just run node coupon API and have it run. What would be another way I can start this? If you reference the scripts. Is that hand? Yeah. Start. Exactly. npm run start will just run that node coupon API for us. But say we had to do some stuff before actually starting, like running that init script, we could build that into the npm start command and then not have to worry about remembering. Cool. All right, so I made some changes to package.json, but I want to get rid of those. How might I do that using Git? So it says modified package.json, but I want to not have that modified. Yeah, was that a hand?
Git log.
Git log.
And then once you know like the commit
Mhm.
ID and like git, I assume, well first maybe like git commit so you don't lose it, and then like git reset.
Yeah. So I'll just run a git status so we see what I've done. All I've done is modified package.json, but I actually want to lose those changes intentionally, so we wouldn't want to commit here. So we could just do a git reset hard if you want to the beginning of that of master. What's possibly safer way to do it? Check out which. Yeah, the last one. So we could just do master, which is a shorthand way of saying the very end of what we're working on, the latest commit. Like that.
You could say package.json.
Yeah, that would be the safest. So git reset to the end of master, git checkout to the end of master would both work perfectly fine in this situation. But git checkout master package.json is the safest way because we're guaranteed not to touch any other files. And so now if I look at package.json, when I added that echo hello I installed for you, now that's gone. And we're guaranteed not to have modified any other files. Does that make sense? Yeah?
But
Good.
if you want to go back to that, you can't do that, right?
Yeah, so I now just lost those changes. So now let's start working the coupon API. One more aside about Git. Oh, is that a hand? Yeah.
So what does the app.get and env mean? Like, where does that variable come
Yeah, I'll show you in 1 second. But one more aside about Git is you should never push your node modules. So the whole point about package.json is it installs everything for you, and it might be a slightly different file whether you're running on Linux or Mac or Windows, and so you don't want to push the modules. So one way to not push it is just to only add the files that you want to. Another way would be to add what's called a git ignore file. So if you do an ls dash, you'll see there's a .git ignore that I added in here. And if we just open that up, it just says node modules, which is a path relative to where that git ignore file is. And it just says, no matter what I try to do, don't let me push my node modules. So this is just another thing that's convenient. So if I accidentally did like git add dot, which says add everything in my current directory and all of its subdirectories, then I won't accidentally add node modules. So that's just an aside. If you accidentally push it, don't worry about it. I'll go back and delete it. All right. So now let's start working on the coupon API. So the question was, what is this app.getEnv equals development? And so when we run Node, when we run like a Node Express script, we want to have a way of knowing whether we're running this in production, like this is our actual web servers out in the cloud, or whether we're just running it in like a testing environment, we're coding, we want those tools that I was talking about yesterday, like that logging. And so app.getEnv is a special flag where it checks your current environment for a special flag called node env, which stands for node environment. So if I do echo this node env, it says development. And so that's because I set this flag to know that we're working in like a development setting rather than a production setting. And so if you set node env to be production, Express will actually work in a slightly different way. It'll like suppress errors and stuff like that. And so this flag here just means if we're in a development environment, I might have coded something slightly differently, just like using the logger and the development versus production error handler down here. Does that make sense? But it's totally fine to not know what that is and just code everything as if it were in production. Also, totally fine to have like debugging tools available, and then before you push to production, just delete all of it. But this is just a shorthand way of being able to do both. Does that make sense? I'm going to assume that's a yes. Cool. So is there anything in this file that we haven't seen before that we're uncomfortable with? No? So let's check out our to-do list and start working on it.
Well, I actually have a quick question.
Yeah.
The parameter for a function next, that just like passes to the next function. Is that what it does? And then there's also error.
Yeah.
What is that?
So if you see the two error handlers, they actually have 4 arguments. And so what that means, if you read through the Express documentation, it tells you about error handling middleware, and it says they must have 4 arguments, where the first one is actually this error. And so if we throw an error up here, it'll actually get caught by one of these two, and the error is actually the error. So if we look at what an error actually looks like in JavaScript, this is what it looks like if we throw an error. So var x is a new error, oops, something messed up. And if I just say, what is x? It says error, because it's actually an error, and it'll throw the error. And we can do it's actually just an object, because if you remember, everything is an object. So arrays, objects, errors as well. And it looks like there's an x.message flag, which is, oops, something messed up. There's not an x.status because I haven't set it. And so if the code errors and then it gets caught by the error handler down here, if you notice, like the error.status doesn't exist. And so we just said, oh, it must have been the code that errored, and so we're going to return a 500. And so all this does is catch the error and just send a blank message rather than sending this entire call stack. Does that make sense? So don't really worry about error handlers. It's fine to just cut and paste this code. Any other questions about the server file? Yeah.
When you have your handle for error, that's middleware. So is that being run asynchronously when you get a request? Like how is that being activated at every request?
So yes and no. So remember, the way that Express works is just a chain of middleware. So depending on what order things are declared, you just add middleware, and one will pass to the next, and maybe one of them will return. And so we have routes here, which is nothing so far because we haven't added anything. So if I said, like, get me slash, what would happen? What would happen first? It might run through this app.useLogger, depending if we set it with the dev flag. If not, then it'll run through the body parser.json, because that's the first middleware we hit. And then that will run it, then next it'll run it through the body parser.uro encoded, which is another middleware. And that presumably would pass to next. And then we hit our routes. If it get caught by any of the routes, we should respond with something. What happens if that route doesn't exist? What happens next? Yeah.
Can you really quickly give us like a better sense of what's happening in body parser?
I'm just going to wave my hand to that because I haven't read through the body parser code. I just say it's a black box. It does what it says it does based on the documentation. And what it does is it creates that rec.body for us. So it just parses whatever the body is. But then it hits any routes. We have no routes defined, so what's the next middleware it hits? For this one down here. And so that's a separate like error handler, which means if we didn't get caught by any of our routes, then it means this route doesn't exist. Therefore, let's create this new error called not found, set the status to 404, and then pass it via next error to the next middleware which handles that error, which is this one down here, one of these two. And what do both of them do at the end? They'll res.status, either the error.status, which we set explicitly up here, which is 404, and then send that. Or if we didn't set a status up here, then it'll send a 500. Does that make sense? Awesome. Any other questions about the server file? What do we see down here? Lines the very, very bottom. What does this line mean? It's a line we've seen in every Express file, but we haven't really talked about it. App.listen at a port just means create this server, start it running at whatever port we specify. And so in earlier things we've seen, we hard-coded 3000, but what do we see here? Config.port. Why that? Yeah. What is config? Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So if we go to the top, we have this config equals require /model/config, which is a file that we wrote. So let's actually look at that file. So if we run ls, we see what's in our current directory. One of them is models, and we can check out what models looks like and look in config. Config, we see module.exports gets this object where port is 3000. Somebody talk me through what's happening there. Anyone? It's stuff we talked about yesterday at the beginning of the day, if you can remember back then.
Is it pointing to port 3000?
Yeah, but on a higher level, what are we doing? Yeah?
Well, you're importing config.json so you can access the port variable.
Yeah, so if we open these two files side by side, line 6 over here, we have const config is require this file. Require does what? It imports whatever that file exports. And so over here, we have module.exports gets this object where port is 3000. So what are we doing there? Yeah, we're creating an object that gets exported with anything that we want to put in it. And so this is the equivalent of setting global variables in C. But the nice thing about this is we don't have to declare those in every single file. We just import our config file. Right now, the only config variable we have set is 3000. We don't really need to put that in there because we only use it once. But it's nice just to have all of our possibly changeable values all in one place. That way, if you want to change the port, you don't have to say, all right, which one actually starts the server? We just say, oh, that's probably in the config file. And so this is how we set it. Make sense? Cool. So now we know pretty much every line in here, right? Is there any line that we don't understand? No? So let's start adding routes. So what's the first thing in our to-do list? Yeah, so first, since we don't have a database set up, let's just do what we did yesterday. And for now, do this. Users gets an empty array, which is going to be our database for now. And so now let's start to define our routes. So we're going to have our creation user, right? So how do we set that endpoint? So what endpoint should that be? Create user, based on our REST organization. /users /create or which one? So one is /user/create and one is post to /users. Which one would more follow the REST protocol? Post, right? Because what if you remember back from yesterday, our REST, the way we set it up is there's an action. An action. Oh my gosh. Action on an object. And the way we define the action is the HTTP method. And the way we define the object is what? Yeah, the endpoint. Yeah, / whatever the object is. So the identifier, the endpoint. And so in order to stay as organized as we can by using our REST protocols or our REST organization, we want to do an action on the object. What's the object? A user. So we have our /users because we're going to pluralize it. And what's our action? Post, creation. So we could do app.post to what? Users. And then what are we going to do? We're going to have a callback, right? So function rec res. That does something. And so now let's start to plan out how this is all going to work. So if we put all of our code in here, this file is going to get really, really long, right? So say we're doing something complicated and it takes 50 lines to create a user. And then another 50 lines to do this, and another 50 lines to do this. And then we have to worry about all the coupon stuff as well. So this is going to end up being like 1,000-something line file. So would you guys rather put it all in one file or split it out into other files? Split it out. It's a design decision. You can put it all in one file, but it might be easier to maintain if you split it up. Especially, say, if I'm editing this file, say I'm doing get users, somebody else is doing create users, somebody else is doing this on a coupon. If we're all working on the same file and all commit it to Git, what's probably going to happen? Lots of conflicts. And so by saving time and splitting them out, we can say, hey, you work on this file, you work on this file. And so the way I generally do this is I have a controllers directory and just keep with it the controllers for each object. So we'll have users and we'll have coupons. Does that organization method make sense? Yeah, so let's go ahead and everybody do micdir controllers. And then in controllers, we're going to do users.js. And so if we're working in users.js, how are we going to get that code back into our main controller file, our server file? Yeah.
What's the command again to create a new file?
Touch. Or you can, if you're within a directory, you can do open dot and it'll open it in the Finder, and then you can use like Sublime or whatever you want to create the new file. So if you're used to using like a command or a GUI-based text editor, that might be the better way to do it. So how are we going to get the code that we write from here into the world, into our router file or our main file? Yeah, so requiring whatever we export from here, and how do we export? Module dot exports get something, right? And so what is module exports right now? Not nothing. An empty object. I heard it over here somewhere. And it's just an empty object. And so how do we add to an empty object? Or how do we add to any object? How do we add something to an object? Push is an array. Yeah, you just define the new property. How do you do that? Yeah, dot whatever, dot something gets whatever you want it to be. Does that make sense? And so we can actually confirm this by running this in the REPL. Var x gets require / users. Oh, I didn't save this file. And so what do we expect x to be right now? Just whatever object we exported. Does that all make sense to everybody, exporting and importing? Is it unclear to anybody? Just need a little bit of practice with it. All right, so rather than exporting just a string like this, omitting the string, we can actually export functions as well by adding methods to this object. So we could say create user. It's going to be a function which takes res and rec and res, maybe next if we want. And we can go ahead and just define that function in here. Does that make sense? Does it not make sense? Does everybody see why we're doing this? And so let's just make a very simple one. We can do console.log. Somebody requested to create a user. And then, so if we did this, all right, so I did what I think this should work. Somebody tell me why I'm right or wrong. Yeah. Yes, so I need to have the module name .create user. And so let's say it's probably called user users. And so how about now? Is that good? Yeah. Yeah, I need to actually import it in. So if I call this users.create user, what do I need to do up here? Const users equals require that file. Are we all good? And you don't have to use const, you can use var, whatever you're comfortable with.
Do we have a user's variable?
Oh, I do. Good call. So are we all good? Should work. Does everybody understand this notation here, line 28? Because what does app.post do? It takes an endpoint and a callback function, right? And up until this point, we had been passing it an anonymous function. We just declare it there while we go. But now we're actually defining the function in a new file and just saying this is the callback function, not some random thing that we're going to define here. Does that make sense? All right, so let's go ahead and run this code. So it's listening in 3000, so let's go visit localhost /3000. This page was not found. Why wasn't it found? Yeah, because we actually visited, like slash doesn't work. It's not an endpoint we defined. We have to post to /user. So how do we do that? Postman, right? Postman, this stuff we've been using over here. So Postman allows us to submit whatever kind of request we want. So we can do post to what URL? Oh, hey, look, the same URL we wrote yesterday. And so what happens when we run this? It's loading. It's loading. Did it work? Yeah, so all we did was console.log, which it console.log, but we didn't actually send a response. And so how do we do that? Yeah, res.send. So if we now write that or save it, restart our file, we can now resend this response, and it worked. It sent that string that we said in res.send. Look, it sent it. Does that make sense to everybody? Is everybody like, I understand this? Is there anybody who doesn't understand anything that we want to go over in more detail? Yeah.
So I could go back to users.js.
Uh-huh.
So you're exporting from here and importing to
Exactly.
and what allows you to kind of okay, I see.
Does everybody understand on the right why we have module.exports.createUser? Yeah? No? Yeah. So when we create a new file in Node, what it does is it's going to eventually export something called module.exports. And so if we require it into something else, that's what it's going to actually return at the end of when it's done running. And so at the beginning, module.exports is equal to an empty object. And so when we do this, we're adding to that empty object. So module.exports is an empty object. .createUser adds a method to that called createUser, which is a function that we just defined here. And so when we now import that anywhere, what it does is it exports that module.exports object, which is right now just createUser with a function, and just does whatever somebody wants. So if they require the file and set that equal to a variable, and that variable gets the object that was exported by this users.js file. And so what does that object look like? Anyone?
Which object?
The object that gets exported by users.js. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's just a single method called createUser that has a function that logs that and returns it worked. And so we can go ahead and use that in this over here by just saying users.createUser over here. Does that make sense to everybody? Yeah.
This isn't related to what you just said,
Mhm.
but I have a question about how, I guess like the package manager knows which packages to install when we say npm install, because I assume we use Morgan and Express and maybe something else.
Uh-huh.
Where is it getting that information from exactly?
So inside of our own package.json over here, we define name, version, and author, which to us is rather meaningless because it's just some information that we use around here. But if you're actually publishing to NPM, that name and version becomes critical because the name actually has to be unique. So if we do npm install express, there aren't like 10 different expresses. There's only one. And so if we tried to call this express and didn't have private true, it would say you cannot use the name express, it's already taken. And so if we had made this not private and push it to the npm repository, then we could actually import it somewhere else by using npm install HSA coupon API. And so that's how it identifies the modules that are up on npm. And the way it recognizes the version is by whatever version you put here. So for us, it's rather meaningless, but if you were actually writing a module for other people to use, you would actually really care about that version number. Did that answer the question? Awesome. Any other questions? Anything conceptual up to this point? Is everybody solid on everything we've learned? Cool. All right, let me stop this recording.